There was a time when the lights came on, the band struck the first note, and five men stepped forward in perfect unison. Their suits were sharp, their movements were precise. Every step looked effortless. To the audience, it felt like magic. But behind that polished moment was a quieter truth. History remembers the sound. History remembers the name of the group. But history often forgets the people who built the foundation before the spotlight ever arrived. In the early days of Motown, before the records went gold and before the cameras learned where to point, someone was teaching the group how to move, how to breathe together, how to command a stage without saying a word. He was not chasing attention. He was building something meant to last. As the years passed, the applause grew louder. The tours grew bigger. The legend took shape. Yet one voice slowly faded from the picture, even as the music lived on. This is not a story about fame lost overnight. It is a story about contribution without credit, about standing at the center of history and still being overlooked. And it leaves us with a difficult question. How many legends do we celebrate without ever asking who helped make them possible? Long before the suits were pressed and the choreography became legendary, Paul Williams was simply a young man trying to find his place in a divided America. He came of age in a time when opportunity for black artists was narrow, fragile, and often temporary. Music was not a dream of luxury. It was a form of survival. In the neighborhoods where he grew up, talent alone was never enough. You needed discipline. You needed reliability. You needed to show up every night, even when the room was half empty and the pay barely covered the ride home. Paul Williams understood this early. While others chased the spotlight, he focused on the craft. When the group that would later become the Temptations began to take shape, Paul Williams was there from the beginning. Not as the loudest voice in the room, but as the steady presence others leaned on. He had an instinct for timing, not just musical timing, but human timing. He knew when to step forward, when to fall back, and how to make five individuals move as one. Those early performances were far from glamorous. Small clubs, long nights, endless rehearsals. What the audience never saw was Paul Williams quietly drilling the group through routines, insisting on precision, balance, and control. He believed that if they moved together, they would sound together. And if they sounded together, they could survive together. This was the foundation of what audiences would later call smooth. But smooth does not happen by accident. Paul Williams became the unofficial architect of the group's stage identity. He helped shape the clean lines, the synchronized steps, the calm confidence that separated the Temptations from every other act trying to break through at the time. It was not flashy work. It was patient work. When Motown began to take notice, the industry saw potential. What it did not immediately see was how much of that potential had already been carefully built by someone who never demanded credit. Paul Williams was not trying to be a star. He was trying to make the group undeniable. In the music business, already learning how to manufacture icons, his mindset was old-fashioned. Collective first, ego last. That philosophy would help the Temptations rise, but it would also quietly place Paul Williams in a vulnerable position. Because in an industry that rewards visibility, the people who build the structure are often the first to disappear from view. And long before the world learned the name The Temptations, Paul Williams had already done the hardest part of the job, making sure the group could stand together when the lights finally came on. By the mid-1960 seconds, the Temptations were no longer just another vocal group trying to survive. They had become a symbol of Motown's promise, polished, controlled, and unmistakably confident. Their music filled radios, their appearances drew crowds, and their presence on stage felt effortless. But effortlessness was an illusion carefully maintained behind the scenes. As the group's popularity surged, the pressure intensified. Television appearances demanded perfection. Touring schedules became relentless. Every movement had to be exact. Every note delivered with precision. This was the era when the Temptations were expected not only to sing, but to represent an image of black excellence that America was ready to consume. Paul Williams was at the center of that transformation. While the public eye gravitated towards standout lead voices, Paul Williams remained the anchor of the group's physical identity. He was the one who ensured the choreography stayed tight, elegant, and unified. On stage, his presence was subtle but essential, guiding transitions, maintaining balance, and preserving the calm authority that became synonymous with the Temptations' style. This was the paradox of his role. The better he did his job, the less visible he became. As Motown refined its star-making machine, individual personalities began to emerge more clearly. Certain voices were pushed forward. Certain faces were framed more often by the camera. The narrative shifted toward singular brilliance rather than collective mastery. Paul Williams did not resist this shift. He adapted. He continued to show up prepared, disciplined, and committed to the group's success. But in doing so, he slowly moved further from the spotlight he had helped create. For audiences, the Temptations were flawless. For Paul Williams, the cost of maintaining that perfection was growing. The demands of touring, rehearsals, and constant performance began to take a toll. What once felt like purpose started to feel like obligation. Yet, he remained professional. He remained present. Because for Paul Williams, the group was always bigger than the individual. At the height of the Temptations' success, few could have imagined that one of the men responsible for their signature elegance was already being edged out of the story. Fame was rising. Recognition was narrowing. And in an industry that rarely pauses to look backward, Paul Williams was quietly learning a painful lesson: being essential does not guarantee being remembered. Success did not leave Paul Williams all at once. It faded quietly in ways that were easy for others to overlook but impossible for him to ignore. As the years passed, the physical demands of life on the road became harder to manage. Long nights, constant travel, and the pressure to maintain perfection began to weigh on him. The discipline that once defined his strength now worked against him. He pushed through when rest was needed. He stayed silent when support was required. Gradually, his role on stage began to change. At first, it was subtle. Shorter appearances, less movement, moments when he stood slightly back while others took the lead for the audience. The show went on without interruption. For Paul Williams, each adjustment carried a deeper meaning. It was not just about performance, it was about identity. Music had been his structure. The stage had been his home. As health challenges grew more difficult to manage, decisions were made in the name of continuity. The group needed to keep moving forward. The schedules could not slow down. The machine had momentum, and momentum does not wait for anyone. Paul Williams found himself spending more time behind the scenes than under the lights, watching rehearsals instead of leading them, standing in the wings while the group he helped build continued without him. There was no public announcement, no dramatic farewell, just a gradual absence that few outside the inner circle fully noticed. This was not betrayal. It was something more complicated and more painful. In an industry built on performance, vulnerability often has no clear place. Paul Williams did not publicly protest. He did not demand recognition. He carried his disappointment inward, where it quietly grew heavier. Those who knew him described a man who remained proud of the group, even as he felt increasingly disconnected from it. He had given everything to help create a legacy, but now struggled to find his own place within it. For many artists, the loss of the stage feels like the loss of purpose. For Paul Williams, it meant confronting a silence he had never prepared for. The applause was gone, the structure was gone, and the world kept moving, unaware of the cost. This chapter of his life was not marked by scandal or headlines. It was marked by absence. And sometimes, absence speaks louder than any song ever could. The story of Paul Williams is not only about one man. It is also a reflection of how the American music industry has long operated, especially during the golden age of Motown. The system was designed to move forward relentlessly, always searching for the next voice, the next image, the next moment that could be packaged and remembered. In that system, visibility mattered more than stability. Narrative mattered more than contribution. America celebrated the success of the Temptations as a symbol of progress. Black excellence presented with dignity, precision, and pride, and rightly so. Their impact crossed racial and cultural lines. Their music traveled far beyond the neighborhoods where it was born, reaching audiences across the country and around the world. But behind that celebration was a quieter reality. Artists like Paul Williams represented a generation of builders, men who shaped the culture without being framed as its heroes. They were essential, yet interchangeable in the eyes of an industry that prioritized momentum over memory. When health, age, or circumstance interrupted their ability to perform, the machine rarely stopped to ask what was being lost. For many older Americans, this pattern feels familiar. It mirrors workplaces where loyalty is praised until it becomes inconvenient, where dedication is rewarded with silence once usefulness fades. Paul Williams' experience resonates because it is deeply human and deeply American. Internationally, the story is similar. Music fans abroad remember the sound, the style, the legacy, but names like Paul Williams are often missing from the conversation, not because they lacked importance, but because history tends to simplify what was once complex. In recent years, there has been a quiet shift. Scholars, fans, and historians have begun to look back more carefully. They are asking different questions, not just who stood at the microphone, but who held the structure together. Paul Williams' life forces that reconsideration. It challenges the idea that impact must always be visible to be real. And it reminds us that some of the most meaningful contributions are made by those who never demand to be seen until time finally asks us to look again. Paul Williams did not leave behind a solo career filled with headlines. He did not become the face most people associate with the Temptations. And yet, his presence is still there, woven into every smooth step, every controlled movement, every moment of elegance the group ever displayed on stage. Legacy is often misunderstood. It is not always the loudest voice or the brightest spotlight. Sometimes it lives in structure, in discipline, in the standards that remain long after the person who set them is gone. Paul Williams helped define what professionalism looked like at a time when Black artists were expected to be exceptional just to be accepted. He carried himself with restraint, precision, and dignity, qualities that shaped not only a group, but an era of American music. When his time on stage came to an end, there was no grand recognition, no public tribute that matched the weight of his contribution. That absence is part of the story. It reminds us how easily essential people can be overlooked when their work is done quietly. But time has a way of correcting what momentum ignores. Today, listeners are looking back with clearer eyes. They're asking deeper questions about who built the foundations of the music they still love. And in those questions, Paul Williams finally reappears, not as a footnote, but as a pillar. His story speaks to anyone who has ever given their best without demanding credit, to anyone who stood behind the scenes, believing the work itself would be enough. It speaks to those who understand that dignity does not need applause to be real. So when you hear the music of the Temptations, listen closely, not just to the lead, but to the balance, to the control, to the quiet confidence underneath it all, because that is where Paul Williams still lives. If this story made you think of someone who helped build something great, but was never properly recognized, share their name in the comments. And if stories like this matter to you, stories about legacy, truth, and the people history almost forgot, consider subscribing. Some legends don't fade. They simply wait for us to remember.